Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about, well, the mental health and myself in
Yes,
general.
absolutely. No, thank you so much for your time and for your willingness to share with me and with the audience today. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, so to get
Of course.
started, I would like to just, get to know you a little bit better. And for the folks that are not familiar with you and your work, can you share with us a little bit about what you do, where you're from, and we can go from there.
Of course. So my name is Luis Cornejo, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in practice now for about 8 years. And I'm originally from Inglewood, California in LA. And I was living up in the Bay Area for a while, probably about 10 years, and I actually just relocated back to LA a couple of weeks ago. So I'm now in downtown LA, like in the middle of the actual city. So it's been
Wow,
a
yeah.
yeah, it's been a transition. I'm still technically adjusting, so
Mhm,
this in my new space and just my new environment right now. But yeah, LA's been home, born and raised
mhm.
here. My family is actually all located here, so that's been another really nice part of this transition is coming back home in a way, and being able to connect with them in a different stage of my life now, coming back after building my practice and going through my work experience up there and meeting my partner up there to now being back home. So a lot of my work right now is in my private practice. So I specialize in queer, LGBTQ plus, and BIPOC mental health. That is through my private practice psychosocial therapy, which is a group practice that's co-owned with Liz Hinojosa, who's also a licensed marriage and family therapist, who I met up in San Francisco when I was working at a nonprofit in downtown that supported primarily the Latinx and indigenous communities of San Francisco and the Bay Area. Liz and I, we hit it off, became close friends. She wasn't just a colleague, she became a confidant and someone that really inspired me. And after I launched my private practice the first year and I was doing it solo, I was like, oh, this is like really lonely. I do definitely feel a little bit isolated now that I'm doing just virtual because of the pandemic and all this stuff. And so when she finished getting her license, we started to talk about like dreams and the future and what we really wanted to set up for ourselves. And we decided to go into this group practice together. So she specializes in working with women, working with couples, doing a lot more cultural healing practices, and I do a lot more LGBTQ, BIPOC, social justice lens, a lot of work around expression, identity, and I am I am in the process of certification right now for sex therapy. So I just submitted my application after 3 years of a lot of work. So I'm really excited about that, and it's a big part of the work that I do. And the main reason for that was that I really wanted to talk about these topics in the mental health field that are usually very taboo or there's a lot of shame or stigma, especially in communities of color, right? When we talk about sex, intimacy, fantasy, sexuality, gender, presentation, I mean, all of these different things. And so that's kind of where I'm really building my expertise and have done a lot of work in educating myself, but also in supporting folks right through sexual related concerns. Um, I also do modeling on the side, so I am a queer model. I am very much a lover of fashion and also being able to showcase representation, right, and inclusivity. So I started doing modeling as well 2 years ago when I launched my private practice, and I started off small, really connecting, networking with folks in the fashion industry and photographers and creatives. And now I've worked with a few designers. I've done a couple shows where I've walked in, a couple virtual magazines that I've done for queer creators. And that was part of the big reason why I moved to LA as well, to do more creative work, to do more content, to be around other creatives. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I also do a few other things. I'm on a nonprofit board for the Latinx Therapies at Alejandra Foundation, where we work to provide scholarships for folks of Latinx folks who are not able to afford therapy, and so they provide the financial resources to cover that. So quite a few little things here and there, but that's a little bit about me and what I'm currently working on.
Yes, well, welcome back to LA. I'm also
Thank
in
you.
LA, so I always love connecting with other folks in my area. So welcome back. It was a long
Thank you.
12. How long would you say? Like 10
It was
plus
probably 10,
years or
13 years on and off. Yeah, it was 10, 13 years on and off. I actually left home at 18. A big reason was that I wasn't really able to be myself here. I came from a very religious, conservative family. They weren't very open, and I was pretty much taught that being gay was a sin, so there was a lot of taboo and shame there. And so for me, my only kind of, I guess, path was to get out, right? And not that it was like really wanting to leave my family. It was really knowing that I wouldn't get to know myself unless I actually had the space, the opportunity, and the safety to do it. And so I left to the Bay Area, started at one university there. A couple years, it didn't go too well. I struggled, had a lot of what now I know was depression. And I think at that point, because we never talked about mental health, I didn't really know. And I remember struggling, not just it was academically, but it was mostly due to my social life, really learning about myself, and not having the support, not being able to be openly honest with my family, right, for the support that I needed. And so a lot of mistakes, a lot of social stuff that really affected me. And I remember that really seeping into my academic stuff. And being a student, being 18, being away from home, being first generation, being gay, it was like,
yeah,
like
all the
all the stuff I went,
layers, right? Yeah, yeah,
all the layers, all of
yeah.
them. And having an opportunity for the first time to actually start to understand those layers, it was a lot. So after a couple of years, I went back home, and I started at Cal State Fullerton. And I left because one, I missed home, and two, I just didn't think that I was going to succeed academically if I stayed. And so I decided, I need to go back home, reevaluate everything. And so I did that. I still didn't even know what I wanted to do for a long time. When I was younger, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and then I realized quickly that I hated a lot of the science and a lot of the courses, and it was like, this isn't what I want to do. And I think I've appreciated that about myself a lot, is that throughout my life there's been moments where I come to these realizations of, this is maybe not what I want, and do I keep putting energy into this or do I not? And I think that was one big moment when I was up there after 2 years going through depression, hating everything, everything with my major, and thinking, this is not what I want to do. So I came back to LA, and I started thinking about doing something in law. I knew I wanted to work with people. I knew I wanted to do something to help. And so I tried to do that. It was, I think, about a semester down there. And then I realized, like, ugh, this is not, I'm also not happy here. And and I share this because I think so many of us go through the education system, and we have such unrealistic expectations of ourselves, and we really kick ourselves down because we think we need to figure everything out, we need to know everything, we need to not make mistakes. And I mean, at that age, you don't even know who you are. And I think for me, that was a big thing, you know, like, who actually am I, and am I doing these things because I want to do them, or because I was told that I should do them? And so that was a big thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a huge thing for so many young folks. Just because there is a lot of pressure to know at a very young age. I think you start getting that question in high school, right? Or maybe even younger than that. It's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's like
Yeah.
you don't know. You say what you think you should say, or what your parents are
Yeah.
telling you, or what the
Yeah.
pressure, family pressure. But the
Yeah.
reality is that when that time comes, when you're 18, starting college, like, what do you know? I mean, I look back at myself, my 18-year-old self, it's like, what did I know? I didn't know anything about what I wanted to do. But there we are, right? Making these big decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's such a loaded question. We ask little kids all the time, right? And they don't even know who they are. They haven't even gone through their developmental process, getting to know themselves. And that was the same thing for me. I started in, I think it was middle school. My parents started to introduce the idea of being a doctor, and I loved it. I mean, I was interested, in what they would tell me. I remember they bought me an encyclopedia of the body, and I used to love looking through it and looking at the pictures. And I knew things that a lot of kids my age didn't know. And so there was definitely a lot of love there for it. But I think as I grew up and really went through my own experiences, I realized that there was something else calling me. And I think that was one of those moments where I realized, this is not what I want to do. This is what my parents wanted me to do, and what I told them, because I knew it would make them happy. And so I moved away from that. Like I said, went to Fullerton. And then at Fullerton, it was that moment too, again, of like, this isn't the direction I want to go. And I remember in that moment thinking like, I'm gonna go back up north. And, I missed it up there as well, the freedom, right? I was back home here. And so it kind of went back to the same thing when I was 18. Um, I finally decided I'm gonna go to San Francisco State, which is where I wanted to go initially, and I didn't go there. So I did my transfer process, and I remember getting there and kind of being stuck in the same major until I met a really close friend who was also on the same boat. And she would tell me, like, I thought this is what I wanted to do, and it's not. And I've been kind of exploring options. And so she brought up psychology, she brought up child development. And I remember sitting there with her and thinking, we never talked about this in my family. I know what psychology is, but it was never something that, we believed in or talked about or even felt like it was something you could do a career with. And she told me about an information session they were having for the major for child development. And so I went to it and I realized how much I really love the understanding of humans and our development and our experiences. And it really resonated with me as someone that, have had my own experiences with obviously being a child growing up, my family, our experiences that being a family in the US when my parents were undocumented, and also for me being born first gen and the oldest who had to like navigate all these different systems for them. And I was like, wow, like this is the first time I've ever heard anyone talk about development and actually like not tell me, oh, no se van a recordar, they're not gonna remember because they're kids, they'll grow out of it. And thinking like, no, like actually, shit, this is like really complex stuff. And I fell in love with it in that moment. And child development, at least at SF State, was really composed of not just a lot of policy courses and legal courses, but also psychology courses and developmental courses. So it was almost like a mix of all this stuff that I wanted to do. And I thought, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And so we both signed up for it. I started the classes and I excelled, like straight A's on my papers. I started to almost like realize like, shit, this is like literally what it was calling me, and what I actually had a lot of, like a lot of passion to do, and I just didn't realize it. And so it went by super fast. It's crazy because when I think back, I'm like, I took about almost 7 years to finish my undergrad because I just kept going back and forth about what I wanted to do. And I always appreciate that now I don't see that as a negative thing. I see it as I was trying to figure out who I was, what I wanted. And honestly, at this point, I think I'm glad that it took that long if it got me to where I am because it aligned and it became part of my journey and what I do now. Um, but I excelled. It went by super fast. I finished. I got the highest GPA I had in college since I started. And those 2 years, I ended up starting work at a child development center afterwards, and I stayed there for about 5 years, working with parents, observing children and their behaviors, doing a lot of information sessions and things like that. And I think at one point I was like, I love this, but there's also something else. Like, what is it that I really wanted to utilize this for? And I started to look into careers, and therapy was a big thing that my parents never mentioned. It was always very negative, and I started to look up careers as a therapist, and I was like, okay, there's all these different things: LMFT, social workers, doctoral level practitioners, psychiatrists. Um, and I remember the one that called out to me was the LMFT one, and I really love the idea of supporting people directly, working with couples, working with children, working with adults. And it was in that moment where I was at that developmental center, and I told myself, you know what, like maybe you could try, and like you should apply and get all your stuff together. And there was only one school I applied to, and it was mostly because when I saw the school and I saw some of the stuff that they offered, and um, it just really really felt right. And that was at Cal State Long Beach. And I remember when I applied, I told my partner, you know what, they might not even reach out to me, yada yada. We got an email. They said they received like over like 800 applications, and they're only taking like 25 people. I'm like, they're not going to take me. And it's just, I think our brain just kind of wants to not set their hopes up. And I remember getting a email and actually being told like, hey, like we want to interview you. We chose you. We had 100 applications that we chose, and you're one of them. We want to interview you. And I remember like getting so excited and calling my parents and telling them I'm going to be in LA. I'm going to this interview at Cal State Long Beach. And my parents have always been those people that, even through their own stuff, being religious and all this other stuff, they've always been supportive. And I remember them telling me, we're going to go with you. So the interview day comes, I fly down. My parents come with me. We're in the waiting room. I'm the only one there with their parents there. Like everyone else is, sitting with their briefcase, dressed up professional. I'm dressed in this awkward tie and I'm sitting there. My mom and dad are dressed up like they're going to church and they're just like sitting next to me. And they're like, okay, we'll wait for you here. Go in your interview. Did the interview, came out, they asked me how it went. Again felt like, I don't know, maybe I probably won't get it. And I left back to San Francisco, and my parents visited me that week after, and I took them out to eat, and we were having a Chinese food in downtown San Francisco with my partner and them. And I told my partner, I remember even the day before, I was like, man, you know what? It's okay. Like I love what I do. It'll be fine. And I'm sitting there and I'm eating, and I get a phone call from a number in Long Beach. And I'm like, I didn't even think about it. I think in my head, I kind of had taken it out of my head. And I stepped out and I answered the phone, and it was the director of the program. And she was like, hey, Luis, I just want to say that we were really impressed by you. And I just want to say congratulations. We want to welcome you into the program. And, as someone that not only was the first to go to college, but then now the first to get into a master's program and go into this career that was totally something no one ever talked about in my family. It was a really big moment, and I remember crying. And my partner like seeing me and coming over and like, what's wrong? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I got into the program. And we started to celebrate, and everyone's really happy. And that was kind of how I started. I went through my program. And the funny thing was that my program required us to go to therapy. And it was the first time I had ever gone to therapy, even though
Yeah.
I was deciding to become a therapist. I
Mm-hmm.
think most of us go into the field and we never even like have gone to therapy, right? Until we
Yeah.
get into it. And it's like, you have to start. And that changed my life.
Yeah.
Therapy, I think, I'm glad, right? Obviously, right? I went into the
Yeah.
field. I'm
No,
glad that it actually,
absolutely.
that
We
I
all
saw
need
the
it.
value of
I
it.
mean, I think we all go into this field for a reason, whether you're really young and you may not really like either you realizing you just stumble upon it, or whether you did your research and you're like, this is what I want to do, or whether you go back to school later in life. But I feel that there is a part within us as therapists that is seeking the medicine, right, that we also need. And academics and learning and reading for some people is a huge source of healing, that just that in and of itself, right? So I think so many people can relate to doing this career and then healing as they navigate this journey. So I wanted to ask you, for you, how has your healing unfolded, as you've, graduated and became a licensed therapist, and now that you're more experienced and seasoned, how have you witnessed your own healing in conjunction with the work that you offer? How has that expanded along with the work that you offer to others?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. And you're absolutely right. I do believe that this type of work is so unique and so special. And, even though it's definitely been westernized, obviously healing is not something that we invented, here in the US, or that was created from Freud. It's stuff that was already being practiced even before in other
Absolutely. Yeah.
cultures. So
Yeah.
I do want to recognize that people have been healing for thousands of
Thank
years. And
you. Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that, because we don't talk about that enough, right? We don't talk about how our indigenous communities have been holding healing ceremonies.
yeah,
They call it something else, but nevertheless, they help an
yeah.
individual heal in community. They
Hmm.
have these rituals, and that's
Hmm.
been in place
Yeah,
for
lots of beautiful
forever.
practices. Lots
Yeah,
of
yeah,
yeah, yeah, lots of beautiful practices. I think you're right. We don't talk about it enough, and one of the things that is really important is for us to acknowledge that the way therapy is now modern day, it's right. It falls under capitalism. That's kind of the way that it's been shaped and created. Right, it's a service. We have different modalities. We pay for different trainings. We have to go through a whole hurdle of things. Whereas and I get it, right? Obviously, there's pros to that. We have certain ethics that we have to follow. We have certain things that protect us, protect our clients. But it also does become a bit muddy, right? In some ways. And healing. I mean, like I was mentioning, right, before, it was done through community. It was done through beautiful practices, rituals, in different ways, right? Where people were passing this knowledge down and this wisdom and storytelling. So I think a lot of that stuff's being reincorporated now. I can go on and on about this, but what I will say is being reincorporated now because there's a value to it, and even though it's often dismissed, it's being recognized. And so a lot of
Yeah.
my work is really centered around that as well, right? The human connection, and not so much the diagnosing, not so much the telling people there's something wrong with them, not so much the ignoring the way that they're impacted by these systems, right, that they live in, by the social context of it, right? Whether it is someone that may be trans and is dealing with depression based off a lot of the stuff that's going on right now, right? Current policies, current politicians, really demonizing, right, people who are trans. And so I think all of that is very important and stuff that we can't ignore in the work that we do. But for me, healing wise, I think what I was sharing about starting therapy for my program, that was the start of, I think, my healing journey, because it was the first time that I sat there with someone, and it took a lot. I went in there thinking like, I don't need to be here. Like, I'm the one that's going to be helping people. Like, why am I here? And sitting there for like 3 months before my therapist actually said to me, Luis, I feel like you come in here every session and you tell me everything is great. And yet, I'm just wondering like why you're going into this line of work. If if every, I mean, I'm just curious, is there anything that did motivate you to go into this work? And it was almost a similar question. And I remember sitting there thinking like, yeah, like I grew up not having that support, and she was so good at like being very gentle about it. And I remember she asked me like, "Well, what was it that you needed support with? What was it that you wish you had?" And I remember breaking down and saying like being gay and like no one understanding and not being able to talk to people about it and having to hide it and feeling so much shame and guilt about it. And she asked me, "How do you feel about it now?" I'm like, "The same." But like, I still have shame and guilt. And that was the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been holding on to this. And it was coming out in other ways, whether it was anger, whether it was, pride, whether it was something, right? Some type of coping, default coping mechanism like avoidance or minimizing. And that was the first time that I talked about myself in that way. And I remember also the first time I felt safe saying it. For a long time, I never felt like I could just talk to anyone openly about it because I was so afraid of judgment. I was so afraid of rejection. I was so afraid of being misunderstood. And here was this therapist so patient with me for 3 months. And then eventually asking me this question, right? Like I'm just like almost like and I don't know if this is true, but almost like she was kind of like, okay, yeah, you come on, like there's you're holding out on me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and that
we've
simple
all had
question.
patients or clients that keep coming, and it's and you're curious, right? It's like, well, but tell me more. What brings you back
Yeah,
when we're not really addressing anything or everything's
yeah.
great? Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
You
And it's a
needed that
process,
inquiry.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big process because many of us, we're afraid, and I work with clients too where I say the same thing. Like I get it, I know that I also need to earn your trust in some ways. And also I want to make sure that you know that this is something we're co-creating together, right? That we're collaborating on. And it doesn't work if I am the one, telling you these things, because if you don't, if you don't see the benefit of it, if you don't see the work that comes on your part, if you don't see the the what's the word, how special this process
Yeah.
is, then it may not work the way that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was what I needed, right? This person to have patience with me, but then say like, what is it that is, that maybe is there that you don't want to share? And I remember from that moment breaking down that that was it. And I've had about four therapists now, for different reasons, insurance changes or moved, relocated. Back then we didn't do, teletherapy, so it was all in person. Um, and each one brought up something very different for me, and I worked on something very different. And that was a big part of my healing journey. As I finished grad school, I excelled academically. I got scholarships. I was able to get a stipend afterwards. I was able to get jobs. My salary went up each time that I was able to do all of these things. And it was because I had started that work where I started
I
to learn
love
about
that.
myself
Yeah.
and just appreciate myself. And I think that the biggest transformation has happened for me in the last 3 years, and that was when I was working at Kaiser. I went through a whole ordeal there. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I didn't have the best experience. And towards the end, my parents had gotten very sick with COVID, and I didn't feel like I was being very supported. And that was the moment where I remember sitting there thinking, like, you're feeling depressed, you are physically struggling, you're sick, um, your parents are in the hospital, you're not working with the people that you want to work or supporting, the way that you feel you could. I was offering half an hour appointments once a month to my clients at Kaiser, and it was so not even an opportunity to have a therapeutic process. It was very much what I like to call drive-through therapy. Come in, tell me your problem, let's go. See you next month. And it didn't feel good. And I remember sitting there. The last straw was being told, "Oh yeah, if you go see your parents and you have to come in, you're gonna get written up if you're not back in San Francisco." I was like, I'm sorry, I not that's not my priority. My parents are, my family is. And so I remember leaving to LA, taking that time off after I did get support from human resources. And when I think it was the second month of my 3-month leave, I got a call from my manager, and it was not a great conversation. I remember just kind of thinking to myself, I need to leave. Like, I need to do something for myself. And that was the first moment where I think all of that work started to kick in. And I was like, why do I not trust myself? Like, I need to take this risk for me. And I remember also having community, right? That was I think the most helpful part. I reached out to Adriana of Latinx Therapy, and I connected with her, and I had asked her, like, "Hey, do you have any support or you can give me?" And she offered me her course that she had. And I remember taking it. Everything was so laid out that I was like, "Oh, I can do this. Like, I can set this up." And I remember just starting and obviously making mistakes and going back and, like, spending money on stuff that I was like, "Oh shoot, I could have done that for free here." All this stuff, just being a first time business owner, being a first gen who didn't really know a lot about owning a business or the legal stuff. I learned from my dad, and business, and for a lot of our community is not the same. It's very different. So having to know all these things was just like so intense for me. And I remember having that course, changing it, because it was like, okay, this is what you need to do step by step. This is how you'll get started. And what was really helpful for me too was that in that moment, I decided I need to show up as myself. If I'm going to go into a private practice, if I'm going to create my own business, if I'm going to offer these services and take the risk completely, I need to be me. And I remember I literally did this, and I tell people sometimes, like, I grabbed all my ties that I used to wear to go to, like, a Kaiser or work at other places, and my button-up shirts, and I threw them away. I was like, I'm done. Like, this
I
is
love
not
that.
me.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
never me. And I hated it. And I remember,
Oh.
like, I started to explore more about myself. I told my partner, who's always been very supportive with me in my process, I think I want to wear makeup. And he was like,
Mhm.
"Oh," he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Yeah." And he was like, "What made you, like, just
Mhm.
want to wear it?" And I was like, "Well, it hasn't been now." I'm like, "It's been always." There was a part of me that always felt very dulled down. I grew up a kid that was often told, "Don't sit like that, don't walk like that, don't talk like that. That's for girls. You shouldn't like this, you shouldn't do that." And always so limited that it was a part of me that I really hated, that I felt like there's something wrong with me because this is how I feel, and yet everyone's telling me it's not okay. And I remember my partner being the first person to just be like, "Yeah, babe, let's go." And he actually went with me to the Mac store, and he was helping me try on stuff. And I remember the people there were so nice and just so welcoming. And it was so fascinating to me because I had seen a lot of queer folks who had been exploring with makeup, who were actually the best in the industry, who people were like, "Oh my God, I need to see their tutorial. They're so good, they're gay and they do this." And knowing that, makeup was about creativity, right? And it's funny because historically, if you think about it, like men wore makeup a long time ago, and things shift obviously socially, all this shit. But I just remember it like having so many excuses, and in that moment, I was like, I can't, I want to explore who I am and how I want to show myself and how I want to feel. Went there, got all this stuff, got super excited. Started to also think about my clothes and thinking like, I hate pants. I hate these button-up shirts. I need to like, what is it that I like? And I started to explore a lot around like, gender fluid, like non-conforming clothing that really felt more fitting to me and more exciting and like felt good. And even at that point, like I had always loved fashion, but I never was someone that would be adventurous with it because of the same thing. What are people going to say? How am I going to be looked at? And I think there was a moment of anger where I was just like, I'm tired of this. Like, I cannot keep living my life the way that other people want. And all of that has given me is depression and anxiety and anger. And it was a slow process, and I will say now, 3 years later, I found what I like, what I don't like. Even with makeup, there's some stuff I love and I'll wear it and I'll use it. There's some stuff that I was like, "It's not for me, I don't like it." There's clothes that I love now that I meet in the middle almost of my energy or depends on how I'm feeling, but I don't shy away from it anymore, and that was a big part of my practice too, right? Was I'm gonna show up as this queer, first gen, indigenous, Latinx human who wants to help people, who has his own history and experience and message. And I will let people come to me if they see something that they really connect with and they say, that's someone that I want to work with. And I have been honestly blessed with a lot of success in that area that, I can say with certainty, my practice is 100% LGBTQ, queer, and or BIPOC clients from all walks of life, creatives, people in different industries who have all sought me out and have shared the same thing with me. I saw you, I heard what you had to say, and I felt connected to you. And I feel like you understand me. And to me, that it means a lot because I didn't have that. And so that is my healing as well. And I still go to therapy now. I still have my therapist, and I've learned to advocate for myself, even with therapists now. I have my first queer therapist that I had never had before. And it's I think a big part of my healing journey, and it's still going to be ongoing, right? I'm a big believer that healing is lifelong. That we're always going to grow, shift, change. And I'm in a new space in my healing right now with my own therapist. So, something else that I'm working through. And yeah, I mean that's kind of a big
So
right to answer
beautiful.
your question.
No, Luis, that was such a beautiful story of your healing. And I'm just so appreciative that you are there doing the work and serving this underrepresented, underserved community and the LGBT, the BIPOC, Indigenous. I think your website says human first, then therapist, and I think you are. What you shared is the embodiment of that, right? And is seeing humans for who they are and all their uniqueness and layers and identities. And what I'm getting from what you just shared is that you welcome that, and and it sounds like that's the folks that go to see you are thriving in that and look for we all look for like-minded souls, right? That resonate in a deeper way, and I think you offer that. And so I'm so appreciative that you are there, that you exist, and that you're offering this work to others, which this medicine, right? Which is even more powerful, that you embody that, and you have that experience to offer it to the healing work for others. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, that philosophy. Oh, sorry, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say
No, go
I
for
want to
it.
thank you for bringing up that message on my website because I think that is what I have strived for as a big not just value but really a something I put into practice. Right, is being human, and I am very transparent even with my clients, with everyone. I am not perfect. I do not know everything. I do not I want to even give the perception that, even as an expert in this field, that I'm gonna be like, perfect for everyone. I'm all about people. I'm all about connection. I'm all about knowing that I also have my own limitations, my own shit that I'm working through. And also, the therapist part, the second, is that, yeah, I have definitely put commitment and love and money and time and work into building myself up right in this field. And many first gen folks know it's tough navigating a lot of these spaces, right? Financially, time wise. And so for me, it's, that's, I think that's why I wanted that to be so prominent there, that,
Yeah,
you're coming to see a
absolutely.
human, but
Absolutely.
also, someone that's put in work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, beautiful. And for the folks that that would like to get to know you a little bit more, maybe even work with you or get familiar with your work, how can people find you?
Yeah, yeah. I have quite a few ways. So the main one is my therapy site with Liz, and that is www.psychosocialtherapy.com. The other one is the media platform that I do run that is getting revamped and getting a little bit of a what is it, a redesign. And that one is www.psychosocial.media. People can read mental health articles there. They can find resources there, hotlines. They can also hear some of the old podcast episodes that we had before, and videos and stuff like that, collaborations. And then my modeling one that I do, and that one's more of my portfolio, but also showcases a little bit of stuff that I've been in, is www.luis dash the little line and then cornejo.com. And Instagram is at Luis underscore the THEE _LMFT. And that's where I post a lot more of like content and get to be a little bit more creative. And so all of those have ways of contacting me if anyone is interested or has a question or wants to work with me in different capacities, therapy, collaborations, creativity, anything like that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I just have to say, I've been following your Instagram account for a long time, and this is the first time we talk that we connect in this way. And I think you just, for me, and in getting to know you over the last couple of years through Instagram, and now talking to you, it's almost like full circle because I see, who you are as a human, as a person. I could tell that you're so kind and so generous with your the healing and the information that you share and everything that you do online. I could tell. And now meeting you, you're so warm and so open to sharing your story, which I think is for so many people the inspiration for their own healing journey and for the path that they need to take. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for inviting me
Yes, of
and for
course.
allowing me a platform to, talk about my
Yes,
story.
definitely. Thank you, Luis. I'll see you next time.